What's up, everybody? This is your boy Ken, aka MrGentleman, your host of MrGentleman Like That podcast. And this week's sponsorship is from Newsly. Newsly is a all-in-one audio super app for iOS and Android. It picks up web articles about the most trending topics on the web at any given moment and read them to you in a natural human voice. For the first time in ever on the internet, the entire web becomes listenable, all in one place. Browse articles from topic choose, start playing, start scrolling, and start listening. You can follow any topic as you specifically as you like, from sports, science to Bitcoin, even for the Kardashians. It will find you on the latest article and you read them to you out loud. And they have podcasts as well. Explore trending podcasts from over 50 countries. Our podcast, MrGentleman Like That podcast, is on there as well. Yes, it is. Shout out to Newsly for that. I started using it as my default podcast app. Download and use Newsly for free from www.newsly.me or from the link in the description. Use the promo code MrGentleman that I will also put in the description and receive 1 month free premium subscription. So you already know, y'all, download Newsly now. Check it out. Support them, y'all. This is your boy Ken, aka MrGentleman, your host of MrGentleman Like That podcast, and enjoy the show. You are now listening to MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast Season 6. Hello, everybody. This is your boy Ken, aka MrGentleman, 1/4 of the Premier Boys Podcast, your host of MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast. And welcome to another new episode of MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast. Hope all is well. And we are finally here, y'all. We are at the Season 6 finale of MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast. And this has been a really amazing year. And I just want to thank everybody that took the time to listen to the show. Thank you to all the guests that came on the show. And thank you to all the new listeners, because, it really means a lot. And once again, thank you. So on this episode, basically the personal episode, we're going to discuss, how I've been doing about Season 6 as a whole, Season 7, and the feature of MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast. And y'all already know what to do. Sit back, relax, and I'll be right back.
This is Paige from the Badass Fabulous podcast, and you're listening to MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. And at this time, I'll be giving y'all the MrGentleman Facts quote of the day. And today's quote of the day is, things may not always go your way, but no matter what, always have faith in yourself and your current situation will change. And what I mean by that is, even though things seem bad right now, you just have to continue to have faith in yourself, never give up, and just keep working hard, and your situation will change. Because you always gotta remember, hard time never lasts forever. So just have faith and just keep going. And that is today MrGentleman Facts quote of the day. Hello, everybody. This is your boy Ken, aka MrGentleman, and I am the host of MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast. And this commercial break is brought to you by MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast. On MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast, we interview many guests about their life journey, pretty much where they come from and where they're at now. Also promoting their brands or whatever they're doing at the time they come on the show. We also have the host talk about personal stories about himself and everything that he's been through. And also we have fun conversation about anything music, anything old school, relationships, wrestling, and many more. And y'all can tune in to MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast every Sundays at 12 a.m. We are also on every Thursdays at 12 a.m. for Spin-Off Series Thursdays, where we have all of MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast spin-off series all in one day, where we have a conversation about music podcast every first Thursday at 12 a.m. The Old School Show with myself and the Star Riding Rod every fourth Thursday at 12 a.m. And we have Date Night Talk Podcast with myself and Miss Vanna B every second and third Thursday at 12 a.m. And y'all can tune in to MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast on Anchor, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Pods, and many more. Or y'all can check it out on the official website of MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast, www.realmrgentlemanlifestylepodcast.com, www.realmrgentlemanlifestylepodcast.com. And tune in every Sundays and Thursdays at 12 a.m. for MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast. Thank y'all for tuning in to this commercial break of MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast. Back to your regularly scheduled program. Cheers!
My name is Samuel Austin, and you are listening to MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Now it's time for the season 6 finale of MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast. We are finally here. 25 episodes this season. 177 episodes altogether. 62 guests altogether. Multi-time #1 for Society and Culture on Good Pies, and 4-time for Top 100 Shows on Good Pies. And honestly, I just want to take the time to thank everybody who took the time and listened to MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast. It really means a lot. Whether you listen to every episode this season, y'all listen to some episode this season, or y'all didn't listen to any other episode at all, or you just rated on Good Pies. I just wanted to say that you listen. But even to those listeners as well, thank you for taking the time to even acknowledging MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast. And this journey, I had many ups and downs, and I just really appreciate everybody that really took the time, because honestly, if it wasn't for y'all, the show would not go where it's going now, especially season 6. So for that, I thank y'all. It really means a lot, like for real. Like it really means a lot. But how have I been doing? I've been all right. Have some good days, have some bad days, but I'm happy that I am at a way better place than I was last year. Even though I'm not at a place where I want to be, of course, but just knowing that I'm not at the same place I was last year, is a great accomplishment on itself. Because last year, I was at a really bad place last year. I was going through depression heavy. Just figured out where is my next move. Figure out how am I supposed to pay bills, and struggling really bad. Dealing with heavy financial issues. Dealing with a beef with one of my best friends over something that he told other people about my situation, and I just didn't like it. Caused us to not talk for 6 to 7 months. Leave the Premier With podcast early last year because I was burned out on that show and burned out on my show and doing way too many things. And I just didn't know when to take a break. And last year was hard. There was even times where I thought about doing something to myself, but I just happy that I didn't do it. And I thank God for that. But yeah, last year wasn't a great year, but I'm just happy this year. My mindset is way different mentally, and I'm continue to go at a better place than I was last year. So yeah, I'm just grateful that things are slowly getting better. Of course, we're not there yet, but sometimes when you're at a dark place, you just have to remember why you are doing it. Whether it's your brand, for yourself, for your family, and for those that care about you. You just have to realize why you were doing it in the first place. And realize that your purpose here is way more than anything. And that's where I realized this. So I just want to say thank you to MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast for saving my life. Because if it wasn't for the show, I want to know where I would be. So for that, I thank you. And this show played a big part of my life. And yeah, and I just thank you for everybody that really took the time to listen to MrGentleman Like the podcast. Thank you to all the guests that came on the show. Thank you to all the new listeners that get the show a chance. And like I said, those that did listen to it, I know y'all gonna listen to it eventually. So for that, I thank y'all. Really means a lot. Even shout out to the fake supporters too. I see y'all. I see y'all lurking, but it's so good. It's so good. Y'all gonna listen too. But yeah, for real, thank y'all. And it wasn't for y'all to show it and grow the way it is. So we're gonna run down everything that happened from last year leading up to season 6 and season 6 as a whole. So as I know, last year when I did part 1 of the next move, I was at a dark place. And I just figured out what was my next move with the show. And originally, I was going to announce that season 6 was going to be my last season doing the show. But after I released this episode, a lot of people hit me up to check it up on me. Saying they're going to miss me and stuff like that. Saying that, you'll help me out with my show to help me to continue. The podcast community needs you. And, hearing the word from many people, some that talk to me on a daily, and some that don't talk to me like that at all, but talk to me that day because they was worried about me. It just caused me to really think of everything I'm doing in my life, not only my personal life, but with the podcast as well. And just took a step back and just plan. Next thing I know, I made a surprise release for a bonus episode called "Don't Call It a Comeback," and just discussing everything that I've been doing and just update everybody, and also showing some love to the podcast community, stuff like that. And also on that episode, it just let me know that season 6 is coming and get release date for season 6. The fact that I feel like there's more things to be done with that series, I released part 2 to discuss the immediately Premier With podcast, Premier With podcast as a whole, and other things as well. What led me to do this series, Don't Call It a Comeback, was LL Cool J, Mama Gonna Knock You Out. And the first line of the song was, "Don't call it a comeback. I've been here for years," and stuff like that. And that song, I don't know, I was listening to that song at the time. to try to figure out, how to come back. And that song really inspired me to just come back and just make sure that season 6 will be my greatest season, And yeah. So season 6 was released on September 18th, 2022. I remember that date because that was Long Live the Chief Money Mal's birthday. So that's how I remember that date, And the first episode of season 6 was the 100 episode celebration. Special guest, Coach Thea Powell, who is also my second older sister. And originally, this episode was supposed to be on season 5, but that episode and 2 other episodes was cut due to the situation I was dealing with, financial stuff like that. So this became the first episode of season 6. But even though we were celebrating my 100 episode, this wasn't the 100 episode. I was already at 140 episode when I did this episode. This was just a late celebration that I never got a chance to do. And this episode was really dope, because, my sister, she was one of my first guests on MrGentleman the podcast, but the first interview was really short. It was like 5 minutes interview. And I felt like, it's only right to bring her back so we get dive more into her life. And it was a really good episode. A lot of people were inspired by her story. And I'm happy to bring her back on the show for the 100 episode celebration. So season 6, episode 2, we did an episode called What Is Your Dream? Basically just discussing about my dreams and how everybody should follow their dreams. And that episode gave me my first official #1 for top 100 shows on Good Pods. And I gotta hold you, I was shocked. And how I found out was, shout out to Raphael for the Geeky Dag. He tagged me in a post letting them know, congrats to Ken being #1 for top 100 shows on Good Pods. I was shocked. I didn't know. so when I saw that, I was like, wow, I was really shocked. And I know when I first joined Good Pods, being #1 on top 100 shows was a goal. Because it was a goal because I did see a lot of black podcasters on the top of the charts. I just saw the Red Dove, they were the first ones. But I still wanted to see more black podcasters on the #1 spot. We did see a lot of it. So I made sure at one point that was a goal of mine, and I got that goal, And now I'm happy to see a lot more black podcasters really putting themselves out there and going hard and being acknowledged, because, like I said, we don't get enough credit. So for that, to see a lot more black podcasts showcased on Good Pod even more now, it means a lot to me. So, and I see a lot of y'all, I shout y'all all y'all out on a daily on my show. So just continue to do y'all thing. Y'all are doing amazing things. Just continue to do it and don't give up, whether it's on this chart or any other chart or anything, any achievement, just don't give up, just give up. Because y'all know why y'all doing the show. I know why I'm doing the show, to help others, guests tell their story, and for me to express my, open up about my life. And so for that, just don't give up. So season 6, episode 3, I brought back my sister, Arthur Sharice, back on the show, and she discussed all her books, from her children's book, from her handbook, from her newest book, and it was a really good conversation. I'm happy that she opened up a lot more on this episode, and she was the first guest that got #1 for top 100 episodes. So shout out to her, and check out her books, y'all. It's really dope books. So season 6, episode 4, which was the Brotherhood crossover, where I had my brother Aaron Keystone Sands on the show, which was originally one of the episodes of season 5 that got cut and added on for season 6. And basically, I went on his show first, Keystone Aaron Sands, discussing variety topics about, MrGentleman the podcast, how it feels to be a black podcast on the top 100 show charts, the premiere of a podcast about I left and my situation between me and Roddy. And I opened up behind it. So I wanted to bring him on my show, not for the rest of the prediction, but to open up about everything for his show, his life, and many more. And that was a good conversation. Always good to have the broader show. Shout out to Aaron Kiesel saying, yo, you already know. So season 6, episode 5, we have another personal episode called What is My Purpose? Basically discussing my purpose in life. And I'm not gonna lie, doing a lot of the personal episodes this season, I was really nervous. Like every personal episode I did this season, I was really nervous because I was opening up a new side of myself that I wasn't sure if anybody would go to even take the time to listen or even appreciate. Also, I was nervous because I wanted to not feel like I sound stupid, or just ramble and stuff like that. So I appreciate everybody that took the time to listen and told me that this episode, a lot of my personal helped them, and it really means a lot and stuff like that. So thank y'all for taking the time to listen. So we took a short break. Then we had season 6, episode 6, which was probably one of my biggest episodes this season, Fear and Anxiety. And when I did this episode, I really wanted to dive more deep into dealing with anxiety and stuff like that. Because I spoke about anxiety on my show, but I didn't really go deep dive into it. And honestly, when I discussed this episode, I always felt like my whole life always dealt with anxiety, whether it was taking test anxiety, whether it is public speaking anxiety, and now genuine anxiety and stuff like that. And the fact that this was probably one of the episodes where a lot of people hit me up and let me know, thank you for doing this episode, because this episode made me want to open up about my experience of my anxiety. So for that, thank you everybody that felt like this episode really helped them, because that was the goal for this episode. I wanted to bring awareness about anxiety and everybody fears and stuff like that. And like I always say, you just never know who you are helping. So for that, thank you for taking the time and really listening to this episode. So season 6, episode 7, we had an episode called Any Question, the Q&A episode. And honestly, this was probably the most fullest episode I had this season. This was also the worst episode that I did. It was just an episode that I just did. I didn't have no planned content at the time, so that was this episode was. So season 6, episode 8, we had some Survivor Series prediction. Of course, Aaron Kiesel was the guest on the episode. Manny Mel was supposed to be a guest as well for this episode, but he couldn't make it. So instead, I brought him back for season 6, episode 9, where we discussed Thriller 40th anniversary. And me and Mally always have a good conversation when it comes to music, because we both music lovers and stuff like that. And of course, we both love the album Thriller, and we literally discuss every song of this album, and we love this album. So yeah, it was a good. I picked the perfect to do this episode with. Originally, this was the premiere with podcast episode, but it just didn't happen, so it was just me and Mally instead. So season 6, episode 10, we had an episode called The Wet Lounge, where I had Ciara Coco on the show, and she discussed about what happened with the Wet Lounge and many more. And this was a really real conversation, and I appreciate her coming to the show. Thank you, Miss Ciara Coco, for coming to the show. Then in season 6, episode 11, which was called Poetry and Conversation, where we had Jalen come on the show. And this is probably one of my favorite interviews this season. It just felt so natural. And, Jalen, is just a natural person. It made me feel, I wasn't nervous, because, every time I do an interview, when I do a guest, I get nervous. I was not nervous this episode at all. And I appreciate her for a really dope conversation. One of my favorite episodes this season. I got a couple more favorite episodes this season. Of course, Danielle and Sharice was also a favorite episode this season. But we got a couple more favorite episodes this season. So, like I said, like this season, a lot of the episodes were not scheduled, planned. Like originally, Jalen episode was supposed to be another guest, and Jalen supposed to be come back from mid-season break. A lot of episodes were not in order, so it was a lot of the season was pretty much improv when it comes to guests and stuff. And I changed a lot of my orders. So yeah, it was a lot behind the scenes stuff. So we was on mid-season break and stuff like that. We was on short break with the Christmas holiday and New Year's holiday, stuff like that. And then we had a 4-year anniversary episode on, January 20th, 2023, celebrate 4-year anniversary. And then we returned with season 6, episode 12, which was the Royal Rumble prediction episode, where I had Aaron Quito Sands and Long Live the Chief Money Mal. Y'all already know wrestling prediction, of course. Season 6, episode 13 was the Valentine's Day episode. Valentine's Day 2023. Season 6, episode 14 was Why I Never Give Up, which was the mid-season finale episode of MrGentleman, the podcast. And this episode was a really improv episode. I did this episode oddly because around this time, I just wasn't feeling like myself. I was just feeling lost, feeling, stuck, I guess you could say. And, I treated it, and, shout out to, Big Brother Advice, because he checked up on me about, what was happening with that. Shout out to Jay Dye. He kind of helped me do this episode, so I just want to shout out to them too, because they play a part of helping me actually want to put this episode out. So I just basically just said that how it was just one of the episodes where I just say how I felt and just don't give up. It was a really deep episode. It was one of my biggest episodes this year so far. One of my biggest episodes this year, not only on Good Pod but in general. So. Yeah, this episode was it was a really deep episode, and like I said, I think everybody that listened to this episode was either inspired or just check up on me and stuff like that. So at this time, this was the mid-season break. At this time, and we came back in April. We came back at the end of March. We came back at the end of March. We came back with season 6, episode 15, where I had a new segment called the Countdown Show. The top 20 countdown show. And originally, I had this type of show on the early season where I did a top 10 countdown when it comes to music, and we played music on the show. So we brought back this segment and turned it into a new series, and we do a top 20 countdown discussion at a certain topic. And this topic was our favorite movies. And I had Jalen back on the show, and this was a really fun episode. Don't worry, Jalen will be back for season 7, and we're gonna do part 2 of this episode. So we can't wait to do that. She wanted to get that. We'll be returning for season 7, just to announce that right now. Then we have season 6, episode 16, which was the WrestleMania prediction episode, and this was the All-Star prediction episode because we had Aaron Quito Sands. We had Long Live the Chief Money Mal. We had Ange from Let's Talk About It podcast. And we had the Sauce King Cal on the show. And this was a really fun prediction episode. And I want to do more big prediction episodes in the future. Our next prediction episode will be SummerSlam, which I will discuss that a little later during this episode. So season 6, episode 17, we have a conversation with Virgo, who we have Jaquita Johnson from Chronicle of a Virgo on the show, and this was an amazing conversation. She opened up about everything she's been with. She discussed about her show, and this was one of my favorite interviews this season. One of my favorite interviews this season. Another favorite this season, and also she became a good friend and a good supporter. Thank you, Miss Jaquita Johnson, for coming on the show and telling your story, because it really meant a lot, and I thank you. So season 6, episode 18, we had 12-3 Talk Back with Miss Victoria J, who was another podcaster who became a really good friend, who very supportive. I appreciate her for also telling her story, and it really meant a lot that you felt comfortable coming on my show to tell your story. So for that, I thank you, Matoya J, for coming on the show. She was also another favorite interview that I had this season. Thank you, Matoya J, for coming on the show. It really means a lot. So season 6, episode 19 was the self-doubt episode, and originally the next 2 episodes were supposed to be a guest. One was supposed to be a returning guest, and one was supposed to be an author, but they both dropped, couldn't make the show. So pretty much this became an improv episode. And originally this episode was supposed to be the season 6 finale originally, self-doubt episode, but I decided to push this episode up. And basically just discussing about, me dealing with my confidence, having confidence issues, having self-doubt about everything that I've done with in my life, with the show and stuff like that, and how I overcame it. So that's what this episode was about. Then season 6, episode 20, we had Nightlife Memory, the story of Ken the Club Promoter Part 2. And this episode, I always wanted to do a Part 2 of this episode, but it didn't never cross my mind. And I felt like since I didn't have no schedule planned for this episode, this was the perfect time to do it. Part 1 was originally on season 4 of MrGentleman like the podcast, and pretty much update on what's been happening with my nightlife journey and where I'm at now with this journey. And believe it or not, this was probably one of the sleeper episodes this season, where this episode did a lot better than I expected. A lot better than I expected. So yeah, it was interesting just saying that. Then of course we had my birthday episode, of course. Then season 6, episode 21. Long Live the Chief, Money Mal came on the show. We discussed about his music journey. We discussed about him joining a Premier podcast. We discussed about him about to become a father, because now he is a father now. Congrats to the bro, and many more. It was a good conversation with my bro, So season 6, episode 22, vibing with Imperial Lashes, and we had the ladies from Imperial Lashes on the show, Sonia, Jessica, and Dawn Marie on the show. This was a really good conversation. We opened up about their show. We discussed about mental health. We dive in about COVID and many more. And they were the first podcast group that I have on the show. I never had a whole podcast group on the show. So for them to come on the show and discuss the topic that they wanted to talk about, especially with mental health, thank y'all ladies for coming on the show and sharing your journey. You just never know who you're helping. So thank y'all for coming on the show and sharing your journey. So season 6, episode 23, Magic National Beauty, we had Lexi London come on the show, and she's a good friend of mine, and she came on the show to discuss her business, life, being educated anymore. This was a good conversation. Thank you, Miss Lexi London, for coming on the show. And the last guest we had this season, which was season 6, episode 24, the Zaya Show. We had Zaya from the Zaya Show on the show, and this conversation was really good. This is also one of my favorite interviews of the season because it felt so natural. And Zaya is, he a cool brother. Thank you for coming to the show, share your story. And thank you for, giving me a reason why I love, doing podcasts. I love doing the show, because after that conversation, you just got me want to go do the show even more. So for that, Zaya, thank you for coming to the show. Yeah, and season 6 as a whole, like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, it was an amazing season, one of my best seasons that I did. It was one of the funnest, season that I did, and it was really good. Thank you everybody that took the time to listen to the season. Thank you to every guest that came on the show. All of y'all did an amazing job this season. And thank y'all, man. Thank you to everybody that gave this show a chance. Thank y'all. So, what next? What next with MrGentleman like the podcast? I do got some announcement about the future of MrGentleman like the podcast. because y'all know this is the season 6 finale, so the main series would not be on for a while. But don't worry, I will still be here because I still got spin-off series Thursdays happening. And this week we got the season premiere of the Old School Show with myself and the Star Rider Ride, and we have a special guest, Miss Vanna B, coming on the show for the Old School Show, which would be every 4th Thursday at 12 p.m. Every first Thursday, we have a conversation about music podcast. Which is the next episode, we got the premiere podcast on the show, and we discussing some topics that y'all will figure out what the topics is. And on July 13th, the season 2 premiere of Date Night Talk Podcast with myself and Miss Vanna B. We don't know the topic for those 2 episodes yet, but look, you can check out Date Night Talk Podcast every 2nd and 3rd Thursdays at 12 p.m. So I'll still be here, but also I will have some bonus episodes for the main series over the summer as well. So we'll be putting out 4 bonus episodes over the summer for MrGentleman Like the Podcast, and one will be my episode on Star Time Podcast with Star Rider Ride. Is one of them. Another bonus episode would be job history, basically discussing all my job history. The 3rd bonus episode would be the SummerSlam prediction episode with Aaron Kito-Sin, Long Live the Chief Melly Mal, and possibly Ange and Kyle, the Source King, returning for the episode as well. So looking forward to that. And the last bonus episode for the summer will be Don't Call It a Comeback Part 3. Basically, will be the Road to Season 7 episode of MrGentleman Like That Podcast. Also, Season 7 of MrGentleman Like That Podcast. When will Season 7 be released? Well, I've been here to tell y'all the release date for Season 7 of MrGentleman Like That Podcast. Y'all can see the new season of MrGentleman Like That Podcast on September 3rd, 2023. So we'll be back in September for the main series again. And I already got some guests lined up. I'm going to start recording those interviews early, so we have a lot of content for the season. So we got a lot of guests lined up. Some returning guests, some new guests, some podcasters. Some guests was supposed to be on season 6, but they got pushed to season 7, and many more. So season 7, we're gonna make sure season 7 is a great season as well, just like season 6. And yeah, so what other stuff that I'm doing with MrGentleman Like the Podcast? I am working on a new spin-off series, but I am going on a new spin-off series for MrGentleman Like the Podcast. But this spin-off series will be a Patreon exclusive. So I've been working on my Patreon for a long while, and I think it's time to finally release it. So I will be releasing a Patreon, and with that Patreon, y'all will get a new spin-off series of MrGentleman Like the Podcast. I'm not gonna say the title yet. The season 7 premiere happened. We will get more information about the newest spin-off series of MrGentleman Like the Podcast. It will only be a Patreon exclusive. It will be on no podcast platform. Probably just YouTube, but for Patreon though. So look out for that. Also, thanks to Old Talk by Joe. When I had an episode, he had an episode called Twitch. And hearing that episode, it inspired me to relaunch my Twitch, because I do got a Twitch channel. I haven't used it in 2 years. So I'm thinking about releasing it, start using it. And I'm going to get more information about that later this year as well. So look out for that. And what is the feature of MrGentleman Like the Podcast? And the feature in general, what next for me in general? So the feature for MrGentleman Like the Podcast, as y'all know, season 6 had 25 episodes this season, which was the biggest season so far. And we know season 7, we going back to 22 episodes for season 7. But not only that, I'm already planning for not only season 7, I'm planning for season 8, season 9, and season 10. So season 7, 8, and 9 will have 22 episodes. season 10 will have 25 episodes. I don't know if I'm going to go more than that. We see how things go, but right now, I will be planning for season 7, season 8, season 9, and season 10. I'm not saying the season 10 will be the series finale season. I'm not saying that. I hope not. I kind of want to keep going with this, but for now, we're just gonna stick to season 10, season 7 to 10 for now, and just see what happens. My next thing I want to do for the future is, get new equipment, and that's the goal, is to get new equipment for the show, push the merch store even more. Cause I do want people to buy the merch and support the show even more. I do want to know what's next for me, because I already set a lot of my goals already. My listening numbers been up there. I've been on the charts. I've been number 1 on Good Pod and stuff like that. I'm working on getting on the Apple chart and every other chart, stuff like that. But what is my ultimate goal? I think my next goal is to get on a podcast award. I think that's the next goal that I want for MrGentleman the podcast. And honestly, any achievement is great achievement, and I like achievement, because I like achievement because, growing up, I felt like I didn't have that much. I didn't have much achievement growing up. So to me, to go so hard on this show and to achieve everything, it felt good. It had a special place for me. So, and that means a lot. So yeah, also going on more guest appearances, because I already got a couple guest appearances lined up coming up. But before I say the shows I'm going to appear on, the shows that I've been on this season, of course, when Aaron Quinto Sands, I was on Quinto with Aaron Sands this season. I was also on Chronicle of a Virgo, hosted by Chiquita. I was also on The Math Debaters, hosted by DeAndre Robinson. Shout out to the bro. I was also on the Fandalonian podcast with Mr. Richardson and Mr. G, and shout out to them. I was also on Troll Street Talkback with Victoria J. Shout out to her. And I'm also on Star Time podcast, hosted by the Star Rider Ride. And yeah, also got another announcement. I am going on podcast tour this summer. So I will be appearing on other podcasters. And some of them is already lined up, like, things about us, Opinion Lashes. I'm gonna be on Crush Gasm. I'm gonna be on the Siltless podcast, and many more podcast shows that I will be going on. I'm not 100 on going on shows that do big groups. I don't work well with group interviews yet, but we see how things go. But I'm good with the one-on-one thing for now and stuff like that. But not only that, I am also going on a podcast tour with the Premier Podcast. We are going on tour as well on other platforms as well, which would be our first time, because the Premier Podcast never been on a podcast appearance together. So this would be our first, and we're looking forward to that. And yeah, I'm looking forward to more big things to go with the show, and more things to grow with the show, and more people to tune in and tell their stories, and more, and also where I could open up about my life experiences, because like I said, I love doing the show. I love hearing people's stories, from hearing my close friend, giving them a platform for them to tell their story, to opening up my platform to everybody to tell their story, and seeing you just never know who you're helping. Well, me opening up about things in my life where I never was the person to open up to anybody. So like I said, MrGentleman the podcast saved my life, and I thank you everybody that took the time to listen. And before I go, final message is, even when things is hard, do not give up. Have faith in yourself. Things not gonna happen overnight. Just have to continue to work hard and just don't give up. Things may seem hard now, but once the situation changes, things will get better. And if you want to set a goal, whether your podcast show is you're doing it for a hobby, you're doing it for you want to grow your brand, you're doing it because you want to help others, or you're doing it just because, don't give up, because you just never know what this journey can take you. And also during the journey, you'll support others. Because at the end of the day, you need support to grow your platform. I'm going to say this again. Support others because you need others to help you grow. You can't do it all by yourself. And also have faith in your brand. Have faith in your brand. Don't give up. And set a goal on what you want to do for your show. And most importantly, don't give up and stay humble. Don't let success get to your head, because you can lose that in any moment. So stay humble and just, most important thing, always be yourself. And I'll be right back. Hello, everybody. This is your boy Ken, aka MrGentleman. Now, I am the host of MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast, and this commercial break is brought to you by MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast presents Spin-off Series Thursdays. And Spin-off Series Thursday is the new home for MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast Spin-off Series. That brought to you shows like A Conversation About Music Podcast, The Old School Show, and Date Night Talk Podcast. And A Conversation About Music Podcast is a music spin-off series where we talk about anything music, from the current music scene and the old school music scene, where we interview many guests that's in the music industry and artists about their music journey. We have a segment game called The Face Off, which is a versus inspired game. And we have roundtable discussion about variety of music topics. And y'all can check out A Conversation About Music Podcast every first Thursday at 12 a.m. Every first Thursday at 12 a.m. Now, the Old School Show that featured myself and the star Roddy Rod is a show where we discuss anything old school, from music, TV shows, movies, and many more. We also bring in guests to join in on the old school conversation. Y'all can check out the Old School Show with myself and the star Roddy Rod every fourth Thursday at 12 a.m. Every fourth Thursday at 12 a.m. And last but not least, we have Date Night Talk Podcast with myself and Miss Vanna B, where we talk about anything relationship related topics like love, dating, relationships, cheating, the good and the bad, and many more. And y'all can check out this spin-off series, Date Night Talk Podcast, every second and third Thursday at 12 p.m. So look out for MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast presents Spin-off Series Thursday, A Conversation About Music Podcast every first Thursday. The Old School Show with myself and the star Roddy Rod every fourth Thursdays, and Date Night Talk Podcast with myself and Miss Vanna B every second and third Thursdays. And y'all can check out MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast every Sundays for the main series and every Thursday for spin-off series Thursdays. And thank y'all for checking out this commercial break. And now back to your regularly scheduled program. True! just want to take the time to thank everybody for tuning in to this latest episode of MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast. Thank you for tuning in to the season 6 finale of MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast. Thank you for everybody that listened to all 25 episodes of season 6 of MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast. Thank you to every listen, every rating, every shout out. Everything that y'all do, it really means a lot. And thank you, y'all. This show would not be where it at if it wasn't for y'all. So for that, I thank y'all from the bottom of my heart. Like, for real, it really means a lot. It really means a lot. Thank you to every guest that came this season. New guests and returning guests that came to MrGentleman like the podcast this season. If it wasn't for y'all, this show, thank you for telling your story, man. Thank you for telling your story. Thank you for every fun conversation. And thank you for being you. So I just want to acknowledge every guest that came this season of MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast. Thank you, Sierra Coco from the Wet Lounge Podcast. Thank you to MrGentleman, one half of the Funny Girl Podcast with It's Michelle Podcast. Thank you to Ange from Let's Talk About It Podcast. Thank you to Kyle, the Sauce King, one half of the Bridge Podcast coming this summer. Thank you to Shaquita Johnson from A Chronicle of a Virgo Podcast. Thank you to Miss Victoria J from Toast Street Talkback. Thank you to Sonia, Jessica, and Dawn Marie from the Opinionated Lashes Podcast. Thank you to Miss Lexi London, and thank you to Zaya from the Zaya Show for coming on the show. That's all the new guests that came this season. But also shout out to my returning guests that came this season. Shout out to Coach Bayel Powell of Coaching Out Loud Podcast. Shout out to Arthur Sharice Powell. Thank you to Aaron Kingso Sands, 1/4 of the Premier Podcast and host of King Talk with Aaron Sands. And thank you to Long Live the Chief, Monty Mal, 1/4 of the Premier Podcast and the Bridge Podcast. Thank you all the guests that came on the show this season. And just thank you to everybody, man. Like I said, it really means a lot. And if it wasn't for y'all, the listeners, the guests, everybody who shared, rated, listened to the show, it really means a lot. And, from the bottom of my heart, I thank y'all, man. It really means a lot, like, for real. I thank y'all. And, MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast every Sundays and Thursdays. And y'all can listen to MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcast, our radio, Amazon Music, Good Pods, and many more. Y'all can rate the show 5-star rating on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Good Pods, and Pod Chasers. The more y'all rate the show, the more people know about MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast. Even though season 6 of MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast is over, y'all can still check out Spin-off Series Thursdays. Every Thursday at 12 p.m. Every first Thursday, we got a conversation about music podcast. Every second and third Thursday, we got Date Night Talk Podcast with myself and Miss Vanna B. Every fourth Thursday, we got the Old School Show with myself and the Star Rider Ride. Y'all can check out Spin-off Series Thursday every Thursday at 12 p.m. And y'all can also check me out on the Premier Boys Podcast with myself, Aaron Quinto San, Star Rider Ride, and Long Live the Chief Mighty Mal. New episodes every Wednesday at 12 p.m. New episodes every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Y'all can check out other shows from the Premier Powers. King Talk with Aaron Sands, hosted by Aaron King Talk Sands, every Fridays. New season coming soon. The Star Time Podcast, hosted by the Star Rider Ride, every Mondays. New season coming soon. And the Bridge Podcast, hosted by Long Live the Chief Mighty Bell. Series premiere of the Bridge, the summer of 2023. Check out all of the Premier Powers right now. If you want to be a guest on MrGentleman Lifestyle Podcast, I do need guests for season 7 Mr. Gentleman, like the podcast. Send me a bio about yourself and everything that you do to my email, ypgent@gmail.com, or hit me up on social media, Ken_Mr. Gentleman. I repeat, Ken, KEN _Mr. MR Gentleman, GENTLEMAN, and we can set something up. Like I said, I am looking for guests for season 7 and beyond. So, I ain't going nowhere. So hit me up, y'all. Hit me up. And y'all already know what time it is. It's time for everybody's favorite segment. It's time for the Mr. Gentleman Lifestyle Shoutouts. But, this week, it's going to be a little different. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to shout out every podcast show that I shout out on the show this season. Every podcast show that I shout out this season. So, and this is my way of giving y'all flowers. All y'all doing an amazing thing. Almost all of y'all supported me on my journey. So this is my way of returning the love to y'all. So shout out to the Red Dove Podcast. Shout out to the Geeky Dad and the Multiverse Kids. Shout out to Cathy Vibes Podcast. Shout out to Lavender Listens. Shout out to Wild Night with Rocky. Shout out to the Michelle Podcast. Shout out to Pedal of Support. Shout out to Today We Laugh and Learn. Shout out to the Things About Us Podcast. Shout out to Stop Thinking With Your Butt Podcast. Shout out to Small Town USA. Shout out to Inspirational with T Podcast. Shout out to the All Hallows Eve Podcast. Shout out to the 69 Risky Podcast. Shout out to the China Podcast. Shout out to Lullaby the Fear Podcast. Shout out to the Crying Diners. Shout out to A Chronicle of a Burgle Podcast. Shout out to the Jabbatir Podcast. Shout out to Dating Will Be the Death of Me. Shout out to the Film and Fermentation Podcast. Shout out to Doom Generation Podcast. Shout out to Wrestling Fan Insight. Shout out to Wrestling with the Truth. Shout out to Above the Ring Podcast. Shout out to Playlist Wars. Shout out to my weekly mixtape. Shout out to Ms. Mary Worth It Podcast. Shout out to the Mad Debaters. Shout out to Trophy Talkback. Shout out to Conversation with Toy. Shout out to Lady Pitch. Shout out to Voices of Four. Shout out to Unpacking the Fox Podcast. Shout out to My Flower Podcast. Shout out to Talking Smack Podcast. Shout out to How Coronavirus Saved My Life Podcast. Shout out to the Family Burrito. Shout out to the Sigma Cinema Podcast. Shout out to the Lady Adonis Podcast. Shout out to Visit Vegas Places with Coral. Shout out to the Oak Podcast. Shout out to F My Work Life. Shout out to High Tea with Mel, Kel, and Kay. Shout out to the Sittless Podcast. Shout out to Part-Time Adult Podcast. Shout out to the Mama's Life Podcast. Shout out to my Survivor Voice, the podcast. Shout out to Let's Talk About It with Ange. Shout out to Confident Cafe. Shout out to the Psychopaths. Shout out to The Wrong Show. Shout out to Dope Interview. Shout out to Jalisa Says. Shout out to Conversation with the Kinfo Podcast. Shout out to The Zaya Show. Shout out to What is WTS. Shout out to Walk With Me. Shout out to Beer in Front. Shout out to Bull Talk with Joe. Shout out to Epinay Lashes. Shout out to Sorta Kinda Besties. Shout out to Just Get Hired. Shout out to the Fandalonians. Shout out to Bet the House Podcast. Shout out to One Night Podcast 614. Shout out to This Can't Be Life Podcast. Shout out to What the F Nana. Shout out to It's a Hard Night Life Podcast. Shout out to They're Interesting. Shout out to the Bromigos. Shout out to the God and Give Podcast. Shout out to Unfortunately the Horse Podcast. And shout out to Selfless Black Podcast. That is all the podcasts that I shout out this season on Mr. Gentleman Lifestyle Podcast. And if you didn't hear your name, don't worry. I will be bringing this segment back next season where I'll shout out 5 more podcast shows on Mr. Gentleman Lifestyle Podcast. So I could give y'all flowers as well. At this time, y'all can always add me on Good Pod, Ken, Mr. Gentleman. Y'all already know why I love Good Pod. Good Pod caters to many independent podcasters. You could rate each other's show. You can see what everybody listens to, and we had the charts. At this time, it's time for Mr. Gentleman Lifestyle Achievements. And at this time, due to this recording, Mr. Gentleman Lifestyle Podcast is number 2 on the top 100 charts. We are still number 1 for society and culture. 23 days at number 1. We are on the top 100 episode charts. We are number 2 for the Zaya Show. For top 100 episode, shout out to Zaya for coming to the show. And thank you everybody that took time to listen to Mr. Gentleman Lifestyle Podcast. Also, for Mr. Gentleman Lifestyle Podcast achievements, I got a new article coming soon. Due to the recording, the article will probably be out in a couple of weeks. So I got an new article coming soon. So look out for that post. And look out for everything that's happening for Mr. Gentleman Lifestyle Podcast. We got big things happening. And thank you everybody that really supported the show. It really means a lot. Thank you for this amazing season. It really means a lot. And once again, thank y'all, man. Y'all already know Mr. Gentleman Lifestyle official website, www.realmrgentlemanlifestylepodcast.com, www.realmrgentlemanlifestylepodcast.com. Y'all can check out every episode of Mr. Gentleman Lifestyle Podcast. Y'all could watch every video. Y'all could check out every guest profile. We had 62 guests that came on Mr. Gentleman Lifestyle Podcast altogether. Y'all can buy merch either through the website or on TeePublic. New merch is coming soon. Please buy some merch so we can help this show grow even more. You can check out every guest appearances. I've been on Mr. Gentleman Lifestyle Podcast. I got a lot of guest appearances coming up. Like I mentioned, I got the Mr. Gentleman Lifestyle Podcast tour. I'm doing a whole bunch of podcast tour over the summer. I already got a few lined up and many more. If y'all want me to be on your show, hit me up. But please, no group interviews. I'm not taking group interviews. I'm taking like one-on-ones and stuff like that. No group interviews. But if not, I'll come to your show and check out the website www.realmrgentlemanlifestylepodcast.com. And once again, thank y'all for tuning in to this amazing season of Mr. Gentleman Lifestyle Podcast, season 6. Mr. Gentleman Lifestyle Podcast. Even though the main series is done, spin-off series Thursday is starting this week with the old school show, and then we got a conversation about music, and then we got a date night talk. So we do be here. Also, look out for bonus episodes that will be dropping over the summer as well, so we can get ready for the new season. And season 7 of Mr. Gentleman Lifestyle Podcast, September 3rd. Season 7 of Mr. Gentleman Lifestyle Podcast, September 3rd. Save the date. And once again, thank y'all for tuning into this season 6 finale episode of Mr. Gentleman Lifestyle Podcast. Have a good day or night, maybe you're listening to this episode.
This is Belinda Jaime, also known as Miss Mariposa, and you are listening to Mr. Gentleman Lifestyle Podcast.